The wind never blew clean in Verdigrad. It scraped. Microscopic slag hissed across the skeletons of towers and scored the paint from old war machines left to rust where they fell. Cassian Orlov lay prone across the flensed wing of a derelict shuttle, a coil of fiber rope digging into his waist while his free hand whispered a magnetic probe through a cracked enforcer drone's cranial cage. The city around him exhaled its ruin. The slow pop of settling girders, the distant cough of a reactor coughing itself to death, the staccato buzz of neon tectonics still trying to live. The drone's head had survived where the rest of it hadn't, obsidian plating spiderwebbed, optics occluded beneath a sheen of fused dust. Cass used the back of his glove to wipe grit from his lashes and felt the probe kiss home with a bright bell-like click. A tiny orb, no larger than a thumb tip, floated free, held by the probe's throat. Neuro-optic, untouched. Worth enough rations to keep power running in his workshop for a fortnight and fund a few questions besides. He rappelled to the street. If the choking fissure between blast-scarred buildings could still be called that, and cut through the warrens by instinct, over a collapsed sky bridge, under a snarled boulevard sign, along a ribbon of scaffolding that had held since before the last ceasefire. Verdigrad was all edges. Cass moved like someone who had made peace with them. His stronghold was hidden in the bones of a transit depot, a maintenance hall he'd resealed with a salvaged blast door and a puzzle of his own wiring. Inside, order, tools on magnetic racks, bins that wore their labels like medals, a generator purring like a cat he'd never be fool enough to try and pet. He hit the decon, stripped his dust cloak, and flicked his news lattice into the air. An anchor's voice sharpened the room. The Verdian Accords have failed. Images followed. Burned banners, overturned chairs, a dais that looked chewed. A human envoy is dead. Saboteur identified. Vesper Solari of the Emberken. Honors revoked. Wanted alive. The grainy still landed like a punch. A humanoid Vulpine woman mid-turn, orange fur catching the light, ears pinned, tail flared for balance. Not a muzzle, but a human face with fangs peeking when she bared her teeth, beauty honed into a weapon by years of discipline. Cass blinked hard. Vesper. The girl who used to sleep 3 bunks away under their guardian's roof, the warrior who learned to laugh again after the third breach. The person he trusted with the coordinates of every back route out of this cratered city. Cass muted the lattice. The hum of his generator surged back like a heartbeat. No, he said to the empty workshop, and knew it as a vow. Across the bench, an old brick of a comm unit blinked a red he hadn't seen since the siege. A narrow light pulsing. The emergency line he and Vesper soldered when they were 16, hidden from every net. He slid onto the stool, fingers already moving. The signal was chewed, salted with interference, wrapped in encryption that felt familiar in the bones of his hands. A pattern like star maps, a trick they'd invented, a substitution cipher keyed to the positions of constellations that hadn't shown over Verdigrad in 20 years. The audio up-resed by degrees, static like rain on iron. Then, thin, ragged, unmistakable. Cass, a breath like a knife edge. It's a trap. Don't follow. Remember the drowned core. The line died. He played the clip 3 times, breath locked in his throat. The drowned core, an old geothermal station half devoured by the earth when the aquifers shifted. Their childhood hideaway. Their map of never-tell-anyone paths. A warning salted with a beacon. Cass set the neuro-optic on a cloth and slid open a locked drawer. Inside, a photograph he kept for days when the city felt too big. 4 faces. A younger Cass, hair not yet burned short. Vesper, all elbows and ears, orange fur still mottled with juvenile pale. Behind them, their guardian, Cade Orlov, and the Emberken tutor who'd taught them both to read field manuals and poetry with equal tenderness. A family made by promise, not blood. He tucked the photo into his jacket. He loaded cells into his plasma carbine until the weight felt inevitable. Then he sealed the door behind him and stepped back into Verdigrad's bite. He didn't go straight to the core. You don't run toward a wolf's mouth just because it's calling your name. First, intel. He moved through coils of cable that earned the transit nexus the name everyone used, the Tangle. Stale synth coffee, ozone, hot solder. A door that pretended to be a wall slid an inch when he tapped the weekly knock. "Either I'm suddenly popular," called a dry voice from inside, "or Orlov finally found something worth more than a lung." Cass placed the little neuro-optic on a patch of reclaimed plastic. "Payment for your time. Bribes go to the top of the queue." Needle's fingers danced. Data bloomed. "You want the chatter, not the bulletin. Your Emberkin is the point of a spear someone else is driving. Cale Draith, Pride Marshal turned demagogue, has half the Emberkin whipped. Humans love simple villains. He's selling them one with pretty teeth." Cass's jaw moved. No words came. Needle flicked a screen sideways with a knuckle. A map of Verdigrad crawled with red pulses. Search dragnets moving outward from the Accord Hall. Contracts out to a merc outfit called the Galehounds. Their boss, Rook Malvec, loves a fat check and hates extradition. The bounty on Vesper is obscene. And the council? Split. Elder Theros argues for inquiry. Old Bear's got a spine, but even iron bends if you hammer it long enough. Cale hammered. Needle zoomed the map. A faded ping flashed near the industrial scar where scorched pipelines cut the land, close to the drowned core. Last authentic transponder chirp before Vesper went ghost. "You didn't get that from me." Needle slid the neuro-optic back with 2 fingers. "Keep your shiny. I'd rather you spend it later. Alive." Cass closed his hand around air where the payment had been. "You softening?" "I'm investing," Needle said. "And I'm not fond of Cale Draith turning my city into a bonfire." Cass nodded once and left, the tangle receding into the metal vine hush of old conduits. Verdigrad breathed heat through cracked vents. Far off, a crowd's roar swelled, and he angled toward it because he needed to see the shape of the lie they were being fed. The plaza beneath a broken orbital elevator had been turned into a stage. Cargo crates stacked into tiers. Torchlight brushed everything with fever. On the tallest crate, Cale Draith, the kind of handsome that made other handsome men scowl, raised a gauntleted fist. Light caught on inserts along his armor and ran like water. His eyes gleamed a predator's cool. "For too long," Cale boomed, "we chased peace with people who call us creatures. We offered our throats to the caller. And now, our so-called sister proves what softness breeds." He threw a projection into the air. Vesper's face at a smear of motion, orange fur like a flame swallowed by smoke. A traitor. A blade in the envoy's back. She learned deceit in a human's house. She carries it like perfume. Cass felt the crowd lean. Not just Emberkin warriors, but tired mothers, children with soot on their cheeks, workers with hands like rope. Fear, grief, fury waiting for a leash. Cale gave it to them syllable by syllable. "She will be found," he said softly, and the quiet of the plaza bent around it. And the stain burned away. Cass slid backward along a catwalk's rib. He'd heard what he'd come to hear. He'd seen the spark catch. He moved until the crowd's heat became nothing more than a pulse in the iron. The Fisher District cracked the city like a fault through a skull. The drowned core crouched beyond, a blunt crown of collapsed cooling towers and subsidence tilted walls. Between here and there were the traces he had been trained to read by hunger and terror. A strip of woven cloth, Vesper's Emberkin rank sash, torn short. Scuff marks, one set heavy, clean-soled, mercenary boots with external clamps. One set light and splayed, a runner who knew how to keep from being shot in the back. 2 spent cartridges gleamed dull in the dust. One, Emberkin plasma charge. The other, steel-jacketed, kinetic. Galehounds. Cass let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd caged. He looked past the fissure toward the drowned core. The earth there always sounded like it was remembering. He found an anchor point for his mag grapple and threw. The line sang across emptiness and bit into a slumped gantry with a meaty thunk. He stepped off the lip of the world because he had long ago decided falling and flying were cousins, not enemies. The core had eaten itself and grown back strange. A maintenance port they'd used as teenagers hid behind a skirt of vines that glowed faintly, a bioluminescent strain that had taken root in chemical spill and geotherm breath. Cass levered the hatch open and slipped inside. Silence. Not the silence of absence, but of a cathedral at night, alive with drip and hum and the small physics of settling. Bioluminescent clusters freckled the dark in turquoise and seagrass green. Massive consoles wore moss-like velvet. Piping looped in silver arcs. Ferns with red-veined leaves unrolled from seams as if the core had decided to rehearse being an ecosystem. Orange fur in the blue-green glow, ears like punctuation. Human mouth shaped for curses and laughter both. Vesper looked up with the reflex of a cornered thing and rose in a single coil of motion, knife in her right hand. Left arm bound from wrist to elbow with a strip torn from her cloak. The old jungle knife. The one that Tudor had insisted she carry into the world. Sharp steel and a sharp mind. Either saves the other 99 times out of 100. Cassian Orlov, she said, voice a low growl, every syllable perfectly enunciated. Did your hearing fail between one word and the next? I said do not follow. He did not lift his weapon, only his eyes. They met like flint and steel. And I said to myself, she only uses my full name when she's bleeding and being stubborn. Here you are doing both. Get out. Anger flashed. It was a mask. He knew this because she'd worn it to hide a broken wrist once, and it had fit the same way. You'll die here, and it will be my fault. He came 3 steps closer and pulled the old photo from his jacket. The core's light put a steadfast glow inside the image's plastic. Vesper looked, and the blade in her hand trembled. The knife clattered to the floor. She didn't fall so much as melt. Cass crossed the bleak feet between them, and when he wrapped his arms around her, she made the sound of someone who'd had her breath crushed out and gotten it back against all odds. Words came in pieces like glass from a shattered pane. Back channel, she rasped. Envoy reached out. Or so I thought. When I arrived, he was already down, burned plasma close. Alarm timed to my step. I saw the chip in his hand. Instinct. Took it and ran. They turned everything to face me. Kale wants a war. Rook's dogs want a bonus. Cass eased her onto the edge of the dais and cleaned the wound along her forearm with the gentleness of habit. She flinched and bared her teeth not at him but at the universe. I didn't send the signal for you to play hero, she murmured. I sent it to keep you away. You sent it, he said, wrapping her arm tight but clean, because you knew there was only one person alive who'd remember what we named this place and make it here. He tilted his head. Do you still have the chip? She reached into a hidden seam on her sash wrap and pressed a slim shard into his palm. When their fingers touched, something that had been pacing at the edge of their lives for a decade padded a step closer. They both looked away at the same time, because they were good at surviving, and naming dangerous things made them hungrier. He was slotting the chip into his pad when the core's door breathed a new light. Brutal white swept through the emerald gloom. Shouted orders slurred around vowels. Rook Malvik's voice was a length of wire pulled across stone. Fan out. He wants the Emberkin alive. Cass's trigger finger twitched. Vesper's growl went to ground. Not head-on, he hissed. Service shaft. Left of that dead fern cluster, the one we... I remember, she said. They moved together, a language in motion, his blaster taking support joints and sparking steam tunes, her knife flashing where armor met tendon, and then vanishing with her into the green dark. When Rook's people steadied and began to bracket them, Cass tore the moss back from a circular panel and dragged it up with a wrenching scream of metal. Down, he said. Vesper went first. He emptied a cell into 2 visors and dropped after her, dragging the hatch shut just as an incendiary kissed the panel and punched teeth into the tunnel's stone. The maintenance conduits were a throat the city had half forgotten. Emergency lights pulsed a slow arterial red. Water spoke to itself in a broken cadence somewhere far off. Above, the firefight mutated into something heavier, bone-deep thuds, and the rolling bark of weapons older than the war. Then the wall to their left collapsed inward in a spray of dust and pebbled debris. Silhouette in the new hole, Enormous. Deliberate. Fur grayed across shoulders like old snow. Eyes with the patience of a mountain. Elder Theros. Ursine. Long a voice in the council that said, think, when everyone else shouted, bleed. I argued to wait, Theros rumbled. No one wished to listen over the sound of their own heroics, so I brought my own. Behind him, half a dozen loyalists slid into the tunnel with the quiet weight of professionals. You're risking your seat, Vesper said. They threaded the Undercity by Theros' map of memory, through a boy-made tunnel widened by bear paws, through basalt that remembered being lava, past a collapsed shrine to a goddess whose name no one had spoken aloud in 2 lifetimes. When Theros pressed a palm to a boulder that looked like every other boulder, it sighed back and rolled aside, revealing a womb of light and smoke and quiet industry. Welcome to the den, Theros said. The cavern unfurled like a star's interior. Phosphorescent veins in the ceiling lent the air a slow pulse. Homes were carved into stone and dressed with woven mats. Children, fox-tailed, bare-eared, human, peeked and were gathered back by hands that had learned not to betray fear in front of the young. The den smelled of stew, oil, old books, and a kind of stubborn hope that made Cass's chest ache. Theros led them to a recess with a table polished by generations of elbows. He looked old and suddenly unbreakable. Vesper set the envoy's chip down. It made the smallest sound in the world. The moment we put this into a sanctioned reader, Cass said, Kale's loyalists will condense like rain on cold metal. Then we do not use their readers, Theros said. We use yours. Cass inserted the chip into his pad. Encryption flared up like a bad dream, and snapped when he fed it a key written in a dead sky. Code scrolled. He felt the pad's processor heat. The den's life breathed around them. You shouldn't have come, Vesper said quietly, not looking at him. If you died because of me. There was no version of this where I didn't follow, he said. Stop trying to pick up a weight that has my name on it. You're insufferable when you think you're noble. I'm insufferable when I haven't slept. This is different. They were saved from further honesty by a tone that pinged the room like a spoon on crystal. Decryption complete blinked across Cass's pad. He opened the first file. Audio. The envoy's voice, weary but unbroken. Marshal Draith, stand down. We have a viable path. Kale's answer slid in like oil. Peace is a story told by people too afraid to win. A pulse. The spit and wail of a plasma rifle, a body hitting a desk. The den didn't breathe for 3 heartbeats. Next. Message threads. Kale and Rook. Bargaining blood. Schedules. Staging. The timestamp that made Cass's scalp prickle. The envoy dead an hour before Vesper entering the Accord Hall. Enough to pull a city back from a cliff. Enough to send it over anyway if handled wrong. Theros rested both paws on the table and bowed his head as if in prayer. When he raised it, his eyes were clear. We cannot ask the council for a hearing. Kale would smother it with ceremony and smirk while doing it. We must tell everyone at once. The official lattice is his, Vesper said. He owns the pipes the lies flow through. Not all of them, Cass said. The Orline Spire. Pre-war broadcast tower. Defense systems are temperamental, but its primary is hardwired. If I get to the top and push this proof into its throat, Verdigrad hears it before anyone can cut the line. No, Vesper said, exactly as if the word were a shield. You won't go alone. I move cleaner, Cass said. A human hauling a pack draws fewer guns than a fox warrior with her ears in the wind. And when they track the broadcast up the spine of the tower, she said, stepping closer, who pulls you out of the teeth? Theros thumped the table with the weight of a gavel. Enough. Blade and shield. He pointed at Cass. You climb and cut. He pointed at Vesper. You and mine will be the wall he hides behind when the wolves arrive. Vesper glared at Cass. Cass glared back. Then they both nodded, because being right mattered less than living to be right again tomorrow. They surfaced 3 blocks from the spire into a dusk that looked like diluted fire. The Orline Spire was a bone needle thrust through cloud. Its lobby had become a ruinous greenhouse for plants that liked dust, lit by strobes of malfunctioning defense lasers that occasionally stitched holes into already dead marble. Cass threaded the gauntlet with the patience of a man diffusing a jealous god. Up the central shaft, mag-rig in one hand, the other fanning a set of old command codes like tarot. He bypassed frozen cars and climbed until his shoulders felt soldered. At the transmitter room, glass panopticon, consoles like altars, he jacked his pad into the master throat and let the spire wake up around him. Capacitors sang. The city's static folded into channels. He hit transmit. The envoy's plea spilled into kitchens and barracks, market stalls, and alley dens. Kale's answer followed, silk stretched over contempt. The sound of murder came last and left silence behind it like a stain. Cass chained the rest of the files into a loop. He watched the progress bar crawl, blinking sand. The first explosion lifted Cass off his feet and put him on his back with the spire's anger playing crash cymbals in his ears. Kale's voice rose from loudspeakers outside. Higher now, cracked by something like panic. If I'm condemned, then let us all enjoy the law's grand finale. The second blast tore a support out of the spire's spine. A heated girder sheared loose and slammed Cass's leg to the console with the remorseless affection of a trap. Pain detonated white. Smoke ate the room. The broadcast went on because he had told it to, and because the world sometimes listened. A shape shot through the doorway, orange and white and fury. Vesper. She took the beam in both hands, muscles in her arms standing like cables, and heaved with a snarl that started in her feet. The girder rose an inch. 2. Cass dragged his leg free with a sound that scraped his throat raw. She didn't give him time to be grateful. She folded him over her shoulder like a bundle and ran for the stairwell as the glass vaulted ceiling imploded into glittering claws behind them. They burst out into a plaza-turned battle theater. Theros' loyalists fought like a wall that knew how to bleed slowly and make the other side drown in it. Rook Malvek, eyes slate, saw the tide turn, saw men he'd paid in armored stumble under the weight of a truth that had stripped their paycheck of meaning. He blew a sharp code on a whistle sewn into his collar. The Galehounds began a disciplined retreat, leaving Kale's pride stranded like a ship in low tide. Vesper set Cass down behind a fountain whose water had long ago boiled away. He was conscious again, jaw locked against another surge of red noise from his leg. The broadcast looped. Everywhere, someone stopped and listened. Some of them sat down hard. Some of them screamed. A handful said, "I knew," and started to cry as if that admission could save them from having been too late. They found Kale in a service alley with his armor half buckled and none of his words left to weaponize. He didn't resist when Theros' two biggest warriors bound his wrists. Kale looked smaller with his mouth shut and no audience. "If you have a last speech," Theros said, "save it for the council." Days became a ribbon with no knots. Surgeons drilled anchors into Cass's shin and set a scaffold inside the bone. He learned the geometry of crutches. Vesper learned how to cook eggs on a generator vent so they didn't taste like copper. Verdigrad shifted in its sleep and woke to a new morning with its throat sore from shouting. Kale's trial, public, formal, blessed by whatever laws hadn't burned, lasted precisely long enough for the files to be played. Exile to the salt flats. A death that makes you work for it. Theros accepted the council seat they pressed on him like a crown, with a weary sigh and a promise to finish the accords the envoy had died for. Human enforcers took down their barbed checkpoints. Emberkin patrols packed up extra munitions and replaced them with shovels. Joint crews cleared collapsed corridors like surgeons doing scar revision. A message from Needle snuck past Cass's locks like a cat through a cracked door. You didn't just break a story. You broke the fever. Healing is a slow language. Cass spoke it to his leg at 3 a.m., when the pain woke and didn't know what to do with itself. Vesper read aloud in Emberkin. Poems about hunters who had learned to sing instead, and laughed when Cass butchered the vowels and made them charms. One twilight she came in with dust on her ears and a look in her eyes like someone trying on a new name. "Theros wants me to head the Joint Security Task Force," she said. "A bridge with teeth. That's the kind of offer you used to dream about," Cass said, and felt his own voice fail at being casual. Was it? She ran a hand down one ear. I dreamed about protecting people who couldn't lift their heads. I dreamed about making sure a kid with a too hot temper had someone to grab his collar before he ran at a tank. Her mouth twisted. Now the word symbol feels like a cage with silk bars. You're allowed to want a door that goes out into a small garden and a stove that doesn't spark like a snake, Cass said. We both are. She came to stand beside the cot, close. Close enough for him to smell the metal in her fur and the citrus of the soap she pretended she didn't like. We were raised under one roof, she said softly. We became soldiers in the same storm. I kept calling you my brother because the word was safe. It wasn't true enough. Her ears tipped back a fraction in something like fear. I don't want safe. He set the photograph on the bench between them. Their guardian smiled out at a pair of grubby children who had no idea how beautiful they would look when the world tried to kill them and failed. They wanted a world that could hold us, he said. Let's finish that. Together. Not as symbols. As us. She leaned in. The kiss tasted like solder smoke and oranges, like spring in a city that shouldn't remember how to have one. Outside, dawn shouldered through Verdigrad's haze. Light lifted rust into rose. For the first time, the wind smelled like the river used to, cold and clean and full of fish. Peace does not arrive, it is hauled. A week after the verdict, a work crew unsealed a tunnel beneath the Accord Hall and found a cache of Kale's speeches, half finished, carefully tailored for any outcome. Theros ordered them archived, not burned. We will need to remember how lies dress, he said. Rook Malvik sent Cass a crate of bandages and a bottle of something pale and mean. A card. Contract void. Consider this even. There will be a day, Vesper said, eyeing the bottle, when we have to decide if we hunt him or hire him. Cass snorted. Both tends to be the Verdigrad way. Needle, never one to let a vacuum remain unfilled, began broadcasting a daily segment called The Unspun, context, documents, timestamps, none of the pretty music. Truth is a muscle. Needle told the city. Use it, or it starts clinging to bones it shouldn't. Vesper trained recruits who had learned to smile with their eyes while wearing masks for too long. She taught them the Emberkin trick of reading a room by the way it breathed, and the human trick of swallowing an insult whole because you were going to need both hands tomorrow to carry bricks. At night, when Cass slept, the city crawled into his dreams and moved furniture. He woke with a word in his mouth, Orline. He'd renamed the broadcast tower in his head without noticing. It had been a ruin for so long, and now it was a memory of a knife you sharpen and keep in a drawer because someday you will need to cut a rope very quickly. The first joint market opened in the plaza where Kale had preached. The crates were still crates, but they were table legs now. A human child tried on a foxtail wrap and squealed. An Emberkin elder held up a human ceramic bowl and nodded as if reconciling himself to the idea that both could exist in the same world without one needing to bite the other. Theros presided without presiding, a mountain in a shawl, hands tucked into sleeves that had probably hidden a sidearm. He let Vesper and a human captain called Mara speak. They didn't promise miracles. They promised roofs that didn't leak, and laws that were loud enough to be heard and quiet enough to listen. Cass limped through the lanes with a stick he'd whittled down until it fit his palm like a seed. Vesper threaded her fingers through his free hand and tugged him toward a stall that sold something green and unruly. "We're going to grow a real plant," she said. "In Verdigrad?" he said. "In a pot," she said, as if pots were a kind of defiance. They carried it home like contraband. Cass set it on the generator housing and rigged a frame to keep its leaves away from the vent. Vesper tilted her head. "You look happy?" she said. "It's disturbing, I know," he said. "I'll see a medic if it persists." She swatted him with her tail. He caught it and kissed the tip while she pretended the fur on her ears was not flushing a color he could feel against his mouth. Truth does not devour every lie. It just makes them easier to spot. A month out, someone scrawled Trader Fox on the side of a food depot and someone else scratched it out so hard they left blood. Thero set penances instead of prison, weeks cleaning latrines, weeks teaching reading to kids too restless to sit. "We are not in the business of making more martyrs," he said. "We are in the business of making fewer fools." Needle sniffed out a plan by 3 old enforcer captains to carve the city into fiefdoms and sell protection like candy. Vesper and Mara raided at dawn and came back with crates of soft armor and a wad of paper money that made everyone laugh. "Imagine worshipping something that burns," Vesper said, tossing a note into the brazier and watching it go. Rook Malvek, in a gesture that might have been apology or foreplay with fate, sent Needle a list of caches buried by the Galehounds on their way out. Verdigrad's new peacekeepers dug them up and let the metal go to hospitals and housing. Cass recalibrated the power grid in 3 blocks with a coil of copper, a prayer, and a map that didn't correspond to anything topographical, so spring came early. Verdigrad had not kept a calendar in a while, but the air knew. Fog that used to stink came in sweet. The river threw silver in loops. Children shrieked for a different reason. Cold water, not plasma. Cass wrote code less and tended wires more. There is only so long you can fight a storm before you start mending roofs. Vesper sparred with recruits in the mornings and spent evenings taking tea with elders who needed to vent bloodless angers before they turned into the kind that break bones. On a day that wore blue like an apology, a message came through the old emergency comm line, patient as a knock from a friend who knows you sleep late. Orlov, Solari, Needle's voice, amused. "Rumor says the spire is going to be rebuilt as a public beacon. You two have any names left to throw at it?" They looked at each other. The plant on the generator had grown 3 new leaves, impulsive as laughter. "Orline," Cass said. Vesper arched a brow. Because it means dawn," he said. "And wire. And the taste of metal when you bite your tongue trying not to say something you will regret." He scratched one ear as if to hide his own smile. "And because I like the way it sounds around your name." "Fine," she said, rolling her eyes, which were gold when the light hit them and molten when it didn't. "Orline it is." Needle sent back a single dot, his way of saying he was grinning. They escorted Kale to the rim of the salt flats, where the wind licked skin raw in a minute. Theros read the sentence with the formality cruelty deserves. Kale didn't ask for his last audience, because he had spent his whole life wanting only that, and he finally understood that wanting something forever does not make it holy. He stepped out into the white and kept walking. Vesper did not watch him go. She looked at Cass instead, and he busied his hands with nothing and everything. Rook Malvik passed through Verdigrad under flags of truce like a shark attending a vegan potluck. He did not make trouble. He did not become a saint. He shook Cass's hand, which meant nothing, and looked at Vesper for a long second, which meant too much. "If ever you want to run wolves," he said, "I have a vacancy." "I run with bears," she said, "and one extremely stubborn human." "I don't poach," Rook said, and left before it became lying. The day they moved the cot back against the wall and declared the workshop a home, Verdigrad signed the first clause of the renewed accords with both species seals. The ink was boring. The moment was not. Someone rang bells no one remembered hanging. Cass wired a string of lights across the rafters that would have been illegal in 7 different eras, then taught the plant to curl around the wire by speaking to it in a language he swore wasn't just him humming to a leaf. Vesper cooked a meal entirely devoid of ration bricks and looked insufferably proud. They ate on the floor with their backs against the generator. When the lights flickered, neither of them reached for a gun. "Do you miss the fight?" she asked, chin on her knee. "I miss the clarity," he said. "But I like this complicated and kind of sticky." "Sticky," she repeated, amused. "You romantic poet." He angled a look at her. "You're beautiful," he said, frank as a ledger entry. "Not because you're perfect. Because you carry your scars like their punctuation in a sentence you're still writing." Her ears did that flush again, and she hid it by pinning him with a stare vicious enough to make a lesser man forget his name. He remembered. He said it for her, and she said his back, and Verdigrad turned over and exhaled. Peace begins and ends and begins again. A summer storm took the roof off the east quarter. Vesper's recruits hammered it back while Cass scolded the grid for its childish behavior. A black market ring tried to resurrect the bounty sheet economy without the bounties. Needle ripped them bare in the unspun and signed off with, "We are not doing this again." A human kid with a burner and more fear than blood set fire to a mural of Emberkin heroes. Vesper caught him before the wall did and held him until his sobs stopped sounding like blame. "What did you want to be when you burned this?" she asked. "Bigger," he said. "I'll show you another way," she said. "You can hate the world and still agree to carry water." Cass started a school on the workshop's ground floor in the hour after lunch when everyone's blood sugar begged to be saved. He taught circuits and latch locks, and how to look at a contract that tells you it is harmless and find the hooks hidden in the white spaces. Vesper taught them how to exit a room without closing a door loudly enough to make an enemy. Together they taught each. Theros spoke briefly. Needle read a list of names no one wanted to forget. Rook Melvek watched from a rooftop with a glass raised in a toast only he understood. Children released paper lanterns that rode the new wind without catching fire because someone had finally engineered wicks that wouldn't. Vesper's hand found Cass's. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Not because she wanted to, but because leaving has to be an option, or staying becomes a sentence. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember our plan, and the way this city looks when it tries, and the way you look when you think no one is watching you watch it." "That's a lot of you look," she said. "I'm an engineer," he said. "Observation is half the job." "Come on," she said, tugging him toward the beacon. "Let's give Needle something sappy to sign off with." They stood under the ore line's light until the city's hum rewrote itself into a lullaby. Verdigrad slept, not with one eye open, but with both closed and a knife within reach, only because old habits die clinging. Cass pressed his forehead to Vesper's and breathed her name like a password he had earned the right to use. She answered with his in the same way. The beacon burned. The plant on the generator unfurled another leaf. Somewhere beneath them, the drowned core pulsed like a heart, not dying, not yet. And above them, finally, stars, faint but real, cut neat holes in the smoke. The river had learned to sound like forgiveness. Every night it whispered beneath Verdigrad's rebuilt causeways, polishing old bones into stones smooth enough for children to skip. Cass often found himself walking there long after curfew, limping through the mist with his jacket collar turned up, listening to the city breathe. It wasn't paranoia that drew him. It was instinct, the kind that lives in the marrow of survivors who've seen too much peace turn brittle. He stopped beneath an archway where light bled through cracked glass mosaics of the old Accord emblem. 2 hands. One furred, one human. Half the tiles had fallen, but the symbol still shimmered faintly in the dark. That's when he saw it. A glyph burned into the concrete, still smoking. 3 jagged crescents intersecting a single line, like a claw mark pretending to be a signature. Cass crouched, fingers brushing the scorched edges. It wasn't graffiti. The heat pattern was focused. Plasma precision. Whoever drew it had military hardware and intent. His comm crackled. Needle's voice slithered through the static. "You're not going to like this, Orlov. Someone just hijacked my side channel. Broadcast a ghost transmission for 7 seconds before I shut it down. Content? 1 line. Verdigrad isn't cured, it's incubating." Then it repeated 3 crescents, 1 line. Cass exhaled through his teeth. The same symbol. "Trace origin," he said, already pulling his carbine from its magnetic holster. Trying. But the packet bounced through off-grid routers. Military-grade stealth. Whoever did this knows how to bury their trail. Or knows I'd be looking. Silence. Then Needle's sigh. "You're a magnet for bad poetry written in plasma." Cass smiled grimly. "That's why you keep me around." He pocketed a shard of scorched glass and started toward the western undercity. The one section Theros hadn't reopened yet. The tunnels there still hummed with dormant reactors, and in their depths, signals could hide like sharks in black water. Vesper's reflection met him at the threshold of their workshop before her body did. The lamplight cast her silhouette against the window, her tail sweeping slow arcs like a metronome marking restrained fury. "You smell like ozone," she said without turning. "That means either you've been near a generator or something exploded." "Neither," Cass said. "Someone's sending messages in fire again." That made her turn. The look in her eyes was sharp, fox bright, the old soldier peeking through the calm she'd been building piece by piece. Where? He laid the shard of glass on the table between them. The glyph scorched into it glimmered faintly. Vesper's ears flicked. "That's Emberkan war code, pre-Accord era, used by the Crescent Fang sect before they were dissolved." "Dissolved," Cass repeated, "or scattered?" She frowned. "Both. They believed peace was a dilution, that purity of purpose came only through conflict. Kale sympathized with them before the war's end, but he never... Never what? Never dared make them visible. If they're resurfacing, it means someone's feeding them again." Cass leaned on the table. "Feeding them what?" She met his gaze. "Hope or hate. They're the same meal, just cooked different." For a moment, neither spoke. The generator hummed. By dawn, the den had received the glyph 2 etched into its outer gate. Theros didn't flinch when he saw it. He just rubbed the bridge of his nose and muttered, "History has a poor sense of timing." Cass, Vesper, and Needle convened in the den's main hall. Holographic projections bloomed above the stone table, showing data trails, intercepted pings, and half-scrambled messages. "Here's what I know," Needle said. 3 encrypted transmissions have gone out from Verdigrad in the last 48 hours, all piggybacked on abandoned satellite bands. Each signal originated from within the western undercity, Sector 12, Reactor Catacombs. Cass whistled softly. "That's where the core's runoff tunnels meet the old heat exchangers? Plenty of places to hide." Vesper studied the patterns rotating in midair. "Crescent Fang or not, they're building something. Recruitment, maybe. Or a weapon." Theros' gravel voice joined them. "Or an idea. Weapons rust slower when made of words." The bear's eyes met Cass's. "Find them. Quietly. We cannot afford another war born of ghosts." Cass nodded. "Then we hunt in silence." The descent felt like a memory of the war, sweat, echoes, and air thick with machine breath. Cass led his lamp-throwing white spears into the dark. Vesper followed close, pulse rifle slung low, fur bristling from the static charge that clung to the walls. The deeper they went, the more the world forgot to sound alive. They found the first mark halfway down, 3 crescents, again carved into a bulkhead, the edges blackened but precise. Beneath it, a line of Emberkan script read, "We do not forgive what evolution forgets." Vesper's whisper was a snarl. Extremist scripture. They used to carve that into enemy armor. Cass touched the groove with gloved fingers. "Then they've already declared who the enemy is." A low hum answered him. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Not reactors. Not natural. "Drones," Cass said. He killed his light. A faint glow approached down the tunnel, blue, scanning. 3 aerial recon units drifted in formation, silent as ghosts, lenses glowing like single unblinking eyes. Vesper dropped to one knee, aimed, and in 3 breaths the corridor went dark again, save for the brief flash of dying circuits. Cass grinned despite the tension. Still perfect aim. She flicked her tail. "Still reckless to talk before we're clear." They reached the end of the catacombs where the tunnel widened into a cylindrical chamber. Heat shimmered in waves. In the center stood a crude altar of scrap metal, piled high with cracked visors, broken helmets, and, worst of all, old insignias from both Emberkan and human factions. Atop the pile burned a plasma torch shaped like a halo. Around it, faint silhouettes painted by soot, humanoid and Vulpine alike, knelt in a ring, motionless. Vesper's fur lifted. They've already started a cult. Cass scanned the walls. Or a message. Look. Every few meters between the scorch marks were etched coordinates. Dozens. Some pointed to distant cities, others to orbital stations. He pulled up a holomap, projected the coordinates, and watched them form a slow spiral around Verdigrad. A web. They're planning synchronized strikes, he said, throat dry. Vesper drew closer to the altar, eyes narrowing. This isn't just rebellion, it's resurrection. A whisper slid through the chamber's intercom, distorted but calm. We thank you for coming home, Sister of the Flame. The plasma halo flared. Shadows detached from the walls. 6 figures in hybrid armor, faces hidden behind mirrored visors carved with crescent scars. The one in front stepped forward and lifted a helmet. The face beneath was Emberkin, silver fur, scars tracing from ear to jaw, and old enough to remember the first wars. Vesper Solari, he said, voice soft and reverent. You carried our blood into compromise. Now you will carry it back into fire. Cass leveled his weapon. She's not interested. The leader's eyes flicked to him. And yet you still follow her. Loyalty is a beautiful flaw. Before Cass could retort, the floor beneath them pulsed, a surge of energy rising from the old reactor vanes. The chamber lights turned red. The leader smiled. Welcome to the second dawn. A magnetic hum built in Cass's bones. His scanner screamed warnings. Reactor, coupling breach imminent. Vesper, he shouted. She was already moving, claws flashing across her rifle as she dropped the first fanatic with a plasma bolt to the chest. The explosion painted the chamber orange. Cass shot the control panel beside the altar. Sparks rained. Run, he yelled, grabbing her wrist. They sprinted through the tunnel as the chamber convulsed behind. Cass checked the readings on his pad, radiation spikes stabilizing, containment fields rebooting one by one. We delayed it, he said, not stopped. The fangs rigged the entire sector. That was just one node. Her eyes went cold. Then there are more. He nodded. And if they trigger the network, Verdigrad becomes a crater. Back in the den, the chamber lights were turned low to conserve power, but the air felt electrically bright. Needle painted a living city above the council table, Verdigrad as a lattice of arteries and scars, overlaid with a new layer of crimson nodes pulsing in mean, impatient rhythm. 23 trigger points, Needle said, voice all wire and sleep deprivation. Primary couplings, auxiliary heat dumps, the old exchanger ribs. The blast we survived was node 9. The others are daisy-chained. Trip 3 at once, and the remaining 20 will escalate into sympathetic failure. Theros folded his paws. Translation. Cass pinched the bridge of his nose. Chain reaction citywide meltdown. A circle of glass where a future was supposed to go. Vesper's ears flat-lined. Who funds this? Extremists don't buy satellite time with prayers. Needle flicked 2 fingers. A corporate family tree unfolded, pennants of shell companies hiding under cultural foundations and logistics concerns. One sigil kept reappearing, slender, crescent shapes, nested around a vertical stroke. Cass felt his jaw set. Penumbral trust, Needle said. Publicly, infrastructure philanthropy. Privately, slush for hardliners who never forgave the Accords. My pull says a human name sits at the middle like a spider. Say it, Theros rumbled. Commissioner de Kessel, Needle replied. Security Directorate, Central Ward. He lost authority when we formed joint patrols. This, he gestured at the red constellation, is him taking it back with fire. Vesper's tail lashed once. Then we cut the web and pull him down with it. Theros nodded. Quietly, while I go remind the council that we have teeth of our own. Cass stepped into the projection, slicing it with his shoulder. We can't hit 22 nodes fast enough. We need a network kill switch. Needle's mouth curled. Got one. Ugly. Risky. We hijack the Orline's backbone and inject a counter-oscillation into the coupling control band. Stalls their timing lattice for 6 minutes. That's your window to physically sever the chain at 3 keystone nodes. Here, here, here. 3 points glowed white, a flooded rail exchanger, a Skyfarm vent hub, and the old floodgate beneath Central. Vesper looked at Cass. He looked back. No one needed to say we go. They were already moving. The rail yard wore a film of green where the river had gotten too affectionate. Vines clutched signals like pen pals who never stopped writing. Half-submerged cars lay on their sides like exhausted animals. Node 14 hid in a sump chamber at the yard's lowest lung, a cube of steel girders in reptile cold water. Of course it's underwater, Cass muttered, buckling a rebreather. Nodes never sit somewhere dry with tea. Vesper grinned with the sharp, bright arrogance that made him fall in love every time he saw it. You hate tea. I love not drowning. Then try this once. She clipped a tether to his belt and another to hers. If you drift, I drag. The water was a slap. It tasted of iron filings and old promises. Their lamps knifed a corridor through silt. The node's faceplate glared back, 3 crescents etched like teeth, a keylock bristling with anti-tamper whiskers. Cass worked by braille and memory while Vesper braced the plate seam with her knife, her tail streaming in the current like a comet's signature. He soldered a bypass, tripped a disarmed diode with a fingernail, then snapped dead the logic that wanted to translate contact into fire. A click bled through the water. The node's indicators dropped from red to a reluctant amber. Vesper squeezed his shoulder, then pointed. 2 shapes sliding in the gloom. Drones, aquatic, propellers whispering. She kicked off the wall, closed like a thrown spear, and tore the first one open at a seam. The second flashed a cutter. She twisted her body with a dancer's malice, let the blade pass her ribs by a finger, then buried her knife in the drone's optic and rode it down. They surfaced into air that smelled newly born. Cass ripped off the rebreather, coughing. Show off. You're slow when you're brilliant, she said, panting, eyes bright. It balances. He thumbed his comm. Needle, node 14 is cold. Start the Oraline pulse on my mark. Copy, but your Skyfarm keystone is on a 10-minute timer. Kessel's boys just woke it. Vesper's ears cut the air. Then we sprint uphill. A quad of armored bikes, Vesper's rifle, came up without hesitation. If you're here to slow us, I'll add mercenary to the list of problems solved today. Rook's smile was half a crescent itself. Relax, Flametail. If I wanted you down, we'd be speaking over you. He flicked eyes at Cass. Kessel wanted to hire me to guard his nodes. I prefer selling insurance. Which is? Cass asked. Information. The Penumbral Trust wired the last payment to a vault under a T syndicate in Central Ward. You go there, you pull the ledger, and Kessel bleeds on the council floor. In return, you don't burn my men when you find them being useful. Vesper didn't lower the rifle. Why? Because a stable city is a profitable city, Rook said simply. And because, he added after a beat, eyes unreadable. I don't enjoy the taste of children cooked by reactor glass. Silence. Wind picked at wires. Somewhere a gull tried out a laugh. Cass nodded once. You run interference on our tail? Rook turned his bike with the satisfaction of a man who had gotten exactly the deal he wanted. Already running it. Took the liberty of letting Theros know he'll need to throw his weight around in 3, 2. A distant boom punctuated the air. Rook glanced up, pleased. That would be Kessel's raid on the den failing. You're welcome. Vesper finally dropped her rifle, but only a fraction. You ever point that nose of yours at us, she said, and I will be the last thing you see. Rook's grin softened into something almost respectful. You and your human make threats like poets. He revved the engine. Now run, heroes. Your clock is hungry. Central Ward's administrative ring gleamed with new steel and old gilt. Under its polished feet ran tunnels no architect claimed, and in those tunnels waited the second keystone, a floodgate matrix that could starve the lower grid or drown it. Needle's voice ghosted their ears. Oraline is primed. On your key, I push a 6-minute jamming wave through the coupling band. That's your rope. Theros cut in, breath faintly rough. The Directorate just tried to serve the den with protective custody. My guard sent them home missing their paperwork. I will see Commissioner Kessel now. Send him a gift, Cass said, crouching over a control column. A copy of his ledger, wrapped in oraline light. Do not tempt me with easy joys, Theros replied, and the line clicked out. Vesper watched the corridor with a predator's stillness while Cass slid the kill switch blade into the floodgate's throat. The panel trembled, hungry to alarm. He played it like a harp instead, plucking energy out of its pattern. A row of indicator runes blinked, then fell asleep. Node 2 stymied, he said. We've got one left in 4 minutes on your pulse. Make that 3, Needle said tightly. Kessel spun up a counter wave from a mobile jammer. He's learning your tricks. Then we stopped teaching, Vesper said. Sky Farm? They stormed upward into light that smelled of chlorophyll and hot glass. The Sky Farm spread like a green sea across rooftops, its solar panes swiveling like a school of docile fish. In the center, a ventilator stack throbbed with a new ugly rhythm. The third keystone's heartbeat. Kessel's troopers were already there. Black visors. Penumbral crescents painted where badges should go. The nearest one raised a hand. By authority of the Directorate. Vesper moved. Authority became a joke written in blood and broken polycarbonate. Cass threw a pulse grenade into the ventilator's diagnostics cradle. Screens went abstract. Above the din, a new voice cut in, boosted on civic channels. Smooth. Practiced. Kessel. Citizens, he intoned, terrorists attack our vital system from within. Your beacon is being used as a sword. I move to sever the hand that wields it. Don't let him own the narrative, Vesper snarled. I won't, Cass said, and aimed not at the node but at the sky. Orline, Cass whispered to the air. I need you to sing louder. He punched a manual override on his pad. The beacon's backbone, already carrying Needle's jamming wave, took on a second freight. Cass's own code, a counter-counter oscillation, keyed to the exact hiss of the Sky Farm's ventilator heart. The risk was idiotic. He felt it as heat in the bones of his repaired leg. If he mismatched the frequency by a hair, he'd accelerate the chain instead of blocking it. Vesper planted her feet between the troopers and Cass. Orange fur became a banner. She moved like a truth, dismantling a lie, a pivot, a slice, a parry that turned a baton into an apology. How long? She called. 2 minutes, he lied. He needed 3. Make them count. Kessel's counterwave slammed into the beacon's throat. Needle, a trooper broke Vesper's guard long enough to hurl a thermal orange light balloon toward Cass's face. Vesper didn't think. She moved. She shoulder-checked the thermal with the flat of her rifle. It burst against her arm in a sheet of heat and pain. She didn't make a sound, just planted and kept holding the line, smoke wreathing her like a crown. The scent of scorched fur knifed Cass's gut. 1 minute, Needle ground. Kessel just looped in a second jammer. This is getting noisy. Good, Cass said through his teeth. Noise hurts the precise. He crosswired the beacon signal through 3 municipal air quality monitors, an old lamppost, and the whisper band that used to carry neonatal heartbeats to the ward. The code thickened into a braided rope. He yanked. The ventilator stack shuddered. The red indicators went pale. The node slipped from arm to sulking to dead quiet. The troopers hesitated, fight emptying out of them like a lung. Vesper took advantage, disarmed, disabled, then simply stood very still, chest heaving, while Cass finally let himself breathe. Tell me it's over, she said. It's over, he said, and keyed the next program. For them. Kessel wanted a citywide address. He got a citywide trial instead. The Oraline carried his voice. Then Needle cut the feed, slotted in a ledger that scrolled like a confession, and layered over it the envoy's last words for good measure. Penumbral transfers. Crescent Fang contracts. A purchase order for satellite time. The commissioner's signature, crisp as a razor. Theros took the council dais without pomp and with all the weight of a mountain deciding downhill. Commissioner de Kessel, he said, you mistook power for purpose. The former we will reclaim. The latter we will set anew. Kessel's troopers faltered, then found new command from their own fear. They laid down their gear. No one clapped. Verdigrad saved its hands for work. The nodes went dark, one by one, not with explosions but with the small size of systems deciding to stop being weapons. Crescent fang sigils were scrubbed from stone by children and elders, together, water slapping in buckets like laughter. Rook Malvek saluted no one in particular from a rooftop, and vanished into a city that suddenly had less use for men like him. In the workshop, Vesper sat on the bench with her arm bandaged in clean white. The plant on the generator had thrown a new tendril over the edge, nosing the air as if to check the weather of a room. Cass stood in front of her, hands hovering because touching her still felt like walking a rope over beautiful danger. She tilted her head. "You're staring." "I'm memorizing," he said. "What?" "The way you look when fire loses." She laughed. A sound he'd kill for and live for in the same breath. "Come here, human." He did. They stood forehead to forehead while the beacon hummed a lullaby only they could hear. Verdigrad's river turned over stones it had been polishing for a year and decided they were smooth enough for skipping. Truth didn't cure anything. It made healing possible. That was enough. Needle's sign-off that night was uncharacteristically soft. "The unspun," he said, "will be short today. We're out of emergency for a minute. Sleep while it lasts." Outside, the city obeyed, reluctantly. Inside, Cass and Vesper didn't. They kept the lights low and the promises high and counted the sounds they never wanted to forget. Breath, heartbeat, the sly rustle of a foxtail against denim, the exact click a generator makes when it decides to live another year. "Tomorrow," Vesper murmured. "Tomorrow," Cass agreed, and let the word be a door they planned to walk through together. Weeks passed. The scars on Verdigrad healed in uneven but determined strokes. Steel beams lifted where bones had broken, hydroponic terraces reseeded with green that refused to die. Every morning the river steamed faintly under the new warmth radiating from the restored grid. The city still smelled of ozone and rust, but in its breath there was now life. Cass spent most days repairing the beacon's upper relays. From that height he could see the whole sprawl, the veins of old ferrocrete now glowing with fresh bioluminescent cables, a visible pulse of coexistence running from district to district. Below, the mixed patrols of human enforcers and beastfolk guardians walked together, awkward at first, but walking nonetheless. Vesper visited him there often, her fur gilded by sunrise. Her once tattered Pride Guard armor had been repainted in the Council's new sigil, a half-sun over a vulpine tail, the emblem of Vesper smiled, the corner of her muzzle lifting. "That's all hero work ever is. The world ends every day in small ways. We just help it begin again." He chuckled softly. "You sound like Theros." "Old bears make good philosophers," she said. "But you," her amber eyes softened, "you make a good future." They stood together, watching the sun climb higher through the haze, painting the rooftops gold. For once, the light wasn't filtered through dust. In the evenings, Cass returned to the workshop that had once been a fortress and was now a home. Vesper had filled it with small, living things, creeping vines that crawled along the conduits, a clay bowl of moss that caught the condensation drips from the ceiling, a nest of scrap metal shaped like a fox's head. Needle stopped by occasionally, complaining that his network feeds were boring now that no one was plotting Armageddon. Theros would send messages carved into brass plates instead of data bursts. He said it was a reminder of weight. One night, Cass and Vesper sat on the roof as rain misted across Verdigrad's lights. The beacon loomed in the distance, no longer a weapon but a monument, a tower that had once been a scar and was now a promise. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Sometimes," Cass admitted. "There's a whole world out there, they say. But it's strange. Every time I plan the route, it circles back here." She leaned into him, her orange fur warm against his side. "Then stay." With me. With this. He turned to meet her eyes, the reflection of a city's lights flickering in her pupils like twin suns. No more hiding. No more pretending we're anything other than what we are. Her smile was soft and dangerous. Say it then? I love you, he said simply. Not as the girl I had to save, not as the sister fate gave me, but as the woman who taught me what living means. Vesper's ears flicked back, her breath catching. Then she kissed him. Slow, certain, like a truth finally spoken aloud. Above them, thunder rolled away into silence. The rain fell lighter, like applause from a sky that had seen enough violence. Months later, a new festival took root in Verdigrad, the Day of Unbinding. Humans and beastfolk alike hung lanterns shaped like intertwined constellations. They floated upward, filling the dusk with orange and silver light, foxfire and starlight dancing as one. Cass and Vesper walked through the crowd hand in hand, no longer fugitives or symbols, just people. She wore a simple cloak, the hood down, her fur gleaming under the lantern glow. He had a small limp, a permanent souvenir from the tower's fall. Neither cared. As the first lanterns rose, Theros's booming laugh echoed from a nearby stall where he was losing at dice. Needle was broadcasting the celebration live, his voice dry and proud. Even Rook Malvek's shadow flickered once on a rooftop before disappearing into legend. Vesper stopped and looked up at the floating lights. Do you think they'll remember us? She asked. Cass followed her gaze. Maybe not by name, but they'll remember the night the truth burned brighter than war. That's enough. She nodded, tail curling around his leg. Then that's how we'll be remembered, not for saving the world, but for giving it back to itself. He slipped an arm around her waist as the lanterns climbed higher, their reflections glimmering on the wet streets below. And for the first time in living memory, Verdigrad felt like a city reborn, its scars softened, its people awake, its future unwritten. Two silhouettes, one human, one vulpine, stood at the center of it all, framed by a horizon where dawn never truly ended. The beacon hummed low, steady, and eternal. The world at last began again.